Hello, everybody. Today I'll be giving my speech in front of my best friend, Yelena Dragovich. And it is titled, Unity and Tragedy, Tied Together with a Ribbon. All of us are able to rejoice in our shared right to an education. We are able to attend a college of our choice and pursue a degree of whatever field it is we desire. This is the joy and the satisfaction I am proud of as a student. Our right to education is something that unifies us young 20-somethings. However, it is not always joy and satisfaction. Colleges are sometimes a scene of tragedy and horror. On April 16, 2007, the latter came true for the students of Virginia Tech College. A student gunman stormed onto campus and took the lives of 33 people, leaving everybody to ask themselves and ask everybody else around them, why? Why would this happen? The Virginia Tech Collegiate Times used their April 20th, 2007 issue in an attempt to voice the issues and the questions of these students and to really provide them with a platform that they could voice how they were feeling. The cover displayed a support ribbon. That support ribbon was composed with letters that made up the words and the hundreds of questions students had regarding that day. The April 20th issue of Virginia Tech Collegiate Times is an example of how visual rhetoric is used in crises. Visual rhetoric is essential to capturing the attention of people during a tragedy, and the support ribbon is an excellent example of how rhetoric calls to unify the individuals involved in the crisis, especially this crisis that we're discussing today. The ribbon, although simple and straightforward, reached far deeper than a simple image on the front of a magazine. First and foremost, the image of a ribbon brings us all to recall times in our lives where we have seen such symbol. In my own experience, I was reminded of a Red Ribbon Week during grade school, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. My classmates and myself all pinned on a red ribbon as a pledge to never do drugs. The red ribbon was symbolic for the importance of our lives and a reminder that living a life and a healthy life was really important. After this memory, I also recalled the use of yellow ribbons by the loved ones of soldiers. Scattered across front lawns, slapped onto bumpers of cars, and even printed on baseball caps, yellow ribbons are everywhere I look. So present that I fail to even notice them now. I understand the significance of such symbols, however, not from the perspective of the average citizen. I understand that they're important and I see the significance of them, but I am actually looking at them from a perspective of someone who studies rhetoric and is constantly evaluating these types of messages and symbols. This type of evaluation is not present in your everyday person, as many of us know, and especially not if that person is going through a tragedy such as the Virginia Tech massacre. That is precisely why such a simple message can hold such symbolic weight and work to unify many distraught students. The ribbon displayed on the Virginia Tech Collegiate Times, displayed questions that ran through each person's head that day of the terrible tragedy and the following days, and they were questions that everybody could relate to. The magazine did not hesitate for 1 second to use even the most troubling and graphic questions. This allowed the symbol of the ribbon to convey the enormity of the tragedy and to allow the rawness and the realness to really sink in. It didn't only allow for the symbol to convey the enormity of the tragedy, but in the inclusion of such questions also allowed each individual suffering as though they were not alone in their thoughts. Because many times when tragedies strike, we feel that we're alone and we feel guilty for our questions and our thoughts, and sometimes we fail to reach out. So this really helped everybody feel together. And this contributed to another one of the goals of the ribbon as visual rhetoric, and that particular goal is to utilize the ribbon as a tool to unify the community during a time when everyone felt separated, alone, shocked, and though their community was shattered. Tragedy such as a massacre on campus is not something that can simply be bounced back from. This is obvious by the fact that we are discussing this tragedy that took place 6 years ago, yet it seems so fresh and so raw to many of us, even as bystanders, not even as people who were there and really experienced it and were witnesses to what actually happened that day. Similarly, one could imagine the freshness and rawness that this tragedy brings to those who experience a massacre firsthand. And this is why such visual rhetoric as the ribbon that was displayed on the April 20th issue of Virginia Tech Collegiate Times is not something that can be taken lightly and can be done in an appropriate manner. It is important to take consideration, it must be done in an appropriate manner. I said it must not, I really mean it must be done in an appropriate manner, because it is important to take the time to consider the feelings and the hurt and pure sadness that is present during such tragedies as this. And I'm satisfied as a bystander, I'm very satisfied with the use of rhetorical messages, and am relieved to see that they were not negative at all. And that's why it's important to do them appropriately, because if they're negative or if the rhetoric is used inappropriately, which we see a lot of times in politics and stuff, that's going to, rather than unify, it's going to continue to separate people during this time. And it is very clear that the authors and journalists, also Virginia Tech students themselves, took a personal approach when presenting the symbol and were sensitive enough to not offend any readers, but bold enough to make their point clear. And that is what visual rhetoric is about, not only in tragedies, but overall. And the task of delivering a rhetorical message through a visual symbol is tricky in itself, and that's tricky in the best of circumstances, let alone tragedies. And when delivering a message using a symbol, rhetorics are limited to their own creativity, and the journalists of Virginia Tech Collegiate Times expressed this creativity beautifully in the use of the ribbon. And the ribbon is displayed as a collection of questions that pertain to the tragedy, and this was brilliant, I think, because it not only captured the attention of the audience by using a familiar symbol, as we have discussed and that we are aware of as it being, we're all very familiar with that, it held the audience's attention by using all of those questions that everybody could relate to. You were stuck reading the questions, like looking at every single question. And once reading, the audience was able to relate to the questions and personalize the article as though they wrote it themselves, because their peers wrote it. So it was very relatable, and I think this is an excellent example of visual rhetoric and how it is supposed to be used, especially during times of tragedy. And Virginia Tech Collegiate Times did the best possible to unify their community after the worst imaginable scenario. And they did an excellent job at this. And I think that the visual rhetoric topic is something that is really tricky. And I think that the journalists of Virginia Tech Collegiate Times did an excellent job. And like we as readers can all really learn from them. And I think that as students, we should all take this into consideration and really think about how we utilize symbols in the future. And I hope you guys all think about that.